to the penultimate segment, reading from Roar the Ganges, a book gifted to me by its author's disciple, Sky Guardian. Its author, Swami Tadatmananda, was not always a Swami, and for about this much of the book, he was not a Swami. But now, in this final section of the book, we are discovering what it's like for him to be a Swami, to be a Hindu monk. Someone who has dedicated their life completely to moksha, for ultimate liberation. And good night, A2. And I'm so happy to hear that you love this book, Priscilla. He was not the only one who was initiated recently into Swamihood. His friend Achyut was, and the two of them, Mark and Achyut, renounced their old names, died as if it were, and became Swami Tadatmananda and Swami Atmadriptananda, who came carrying two large stainless steel containers filled with handles like little buckets. "Are you ready to go?" he asked. "Here is your begging bowl." I grabbed one of the vessels, and we walked out of the ashram gate. Swami Dayananda had instructed us to go to a nearby Annakshetra for our meals today. When he first came to Rishikesh in 1962, he had gone there for his meals, as many other sadhus did and still do. He wanted us to experience how other sadhus live. Annakshetras are establishments that provide free food to sadhus, spiritual renunciates of every kind, and to the destitute. There are two large Annakshetras in Rishikesh, both funded by charitable trusts set up long ago to ensure that they would continue to distribute hundreds of meals each day. The food provided is meager at best, a stack of coarse rotis. A stack of dal would be impressive. A stack of coarse rotis, flatbread similar to Mexican tortillas, and watery dal, a spicy lentil soup. Our guru, Swami Dayananda, once jested about the daily menu. One day you get roti and dal, the next day you get dal and roti. We crossed the bridge to the main bazaar and turned down a narrow lane crowded with shoppers, bicycles, auto rickshaws, and lazy cows. We came to a tall facade bearing the words Kali Kamliwala Annakshetra. Kali Kamliwala means one who wears black blanket. This name was acquired by a sadhu named Swami Atma Prakash, who lived here 5 decades ago. He became the inspiration for this Annakshetra and others that provide food and boarding to pilgrims and sadhus at a number of religious centers in the region. We entered the building and joined the other sadhus already standing in line. Each looked as unique as those who had come to our Bandara, the party we read about earlier this day. And every one of them carried a steel pot just like ours. Such pots have apparently become the standard begging bowls in modern India. The line slowly progressed until we reached a doorway, from which dal was ladled from a huge vat into our pots. We were handed a stack of rotis, which Swami Atmadriptananda wrapped in the end of his upper cloth to keep them warm until we returned to our ashram to eat. According to some scriptures, Sadhus are supposed to spend their days wandering, traveling from village to village, sleeping either in temple halls or under trees. In India's warm climate, Sadhus could roam like this throughout the year, except during the rainy season, when they were supposed to stay in one place for 4 months. At all other times, they were permitted to stay in a village no longer than 3 days. They received their food from homes clustered in the villages. Village folk looked upon the Sadhus as holy visitors and considered themselves blessed by the opportunity to feed the monks. If no Sadhus came begging for a few days, villagers would feel sad and wonder if they had committed some sin for which they were being punished. The lifestyle of these wandering mendicants was meant to free them from all attachment. It was also a lifestyle of tremendous freedom. In most parts of India, villages lie only a few miles apart. Sadhus were not compelled to travel far each day. Most of their time was available for meditation, prayer, and study. When they stopped in a village for a few days, they usually held satsangs, gatherings in which truth was discussed, in which they taught the village folk and narrated religious stories. The idyllic life of a wandering sadhu has been highly praised and idealized throughout India. This romantic image continues to capture the imagination of many, though few actually take to such a life these days. Shankara extolled the utter freedom of this lifestyle in a Sanskrit hymn celebrating the roaming ascetics, those who wear the kaupina, a type of simple underwear, alone. Here we have a translation for such a poem. Reveling always in Vedanta's great teachings, content with whatever alms food they receive, free from sorrow and filled with compassion, blessed are they who wear the kaupina. Taking shelter each night at the foot of a tree, satiated by food their 2 hands did bring, spurning all wealth like a pile of rags, blessed are they who wear the kaupina. Dismissing the feeling, I am this body, discovering within the truth of the self, forgetting all else, near, middle, and far, blessed are they who wear the kaupina. Completely fulfilled in the bliss of the self, freed from attachment to all they perceive, reveling in Brahman, the ultimate reality, all day and all night, blessed are they who wear the kaupina. Reciting the mantra of 5 sacred letters, meditating upon the Lord in their hearts, wandering everywhere, begging food as they go, blessed are they who wear the kaupina. These wandering sadhus were distinguished by wearing various religious insignia associated with the monastic order to which they belonged. On their foreheads they wore various marks. The 3 horizontal lines of ash worn by worshippers of Lord Shiva, the V-shaped mark of Lord Vishnu's devotees, or a simple dot of sandalwood paste or red sindoor worn between the eyebrows. Most went barefoot and wore a single piece of unstitched cloth dyed orange with geru clay. Some eschewed the robes and wore only a kaupina, and a few wore nothing at all, covering their bodies instead with sacred ash. Some carried a danda, a wooden staff symbolic of their order. Worshippers of Shiva sometimes carried a fierce-looking metal trident. Many carried a kamandalu, a pot made from a gourd used for collecting food and water in the days before stainless steel. Even today, a few sadhus still maintain the life of a wandering mendicant. But most now live in modest ashrams or rustic cottages, sometimes alone, sometimes with other sadhus and disciples. Very few live in caves or, as Shankara's hymn acclaimed, at the foot of a tree, while some are supported by the donations of kind-hearted patrons. Many depend on the food from annakshetras. In Rishikesh, I learned that the life of many modern sadhus can be harsh and laborious. I met some who lived in ramshackle huts lacking bathroom facilities and were constrained to walk miles twice each day through blazing heat or pouring rain to stand in line for a paltry meal of roti and dal. And yet, some urban Indians have become highly critical of this sadhu culture, claiming that many become sannyasis merely for the sake of free food and a life of leisure. Perhaps this is true for some, but as there are always a few who abuse the goodwill of others. But it appeared to me that the vast majority of these sadhus had turned their backs on comfortable life they could have enjoyed, choosing instead an arduous lifestyle that provides complete freedom for spiritual pursuit. How these sadhus use their freedom varies widely, depending on their inclinations and circumstances. Most are engaged in lives of meditation, prayer, study, teaching, writing, and so on. Some perform charitable work in ashrams, schools, or dispensaries. A few still wander the countryside, and a few live a loose, carefree lifestyle, reminding me of the hippies of the 1960s. I sometimes observed them hidden along the riverbank, smoking marijuana, a wild plant that grows abundantly in the hills of this region. Standing in line with the sadhus at the annakshetra, I wondered what kind of sadhu I would be. Being born in the West, I did not share their value for religious insignia or for a life of wandering. I did, however, share their value for a monastic life of meditation, prayer, study, and teaching. In a few weeks, I would return to the US, where sannyasa, renunciation, is virtually unknown, where someone wearing saffron robes might be considered a crazy person in an orange bedsheet. I wondered which aspects of sadhu life I should adopt and which I should not. The answers to my questions would ultimately come only after I returned home and learned how to integrate my new lifestyle into modern American culture. My friend Swami Atma-Triptananda and I returned from the Annakshetra carrying our pots filled with dal. As we walked through gate, Neela came to greet us. She bent low and touched Swami Atma-Triptananda's feet. Then she bent down to touch my feet. I stepped back, feeling embarrassed and confused, but she stood before me, grabbed my shoulders and looked into my eyes. Then, without saying a word, she bent down again and touched my feet. Straightening up, she smiled and her eyes sparkled with amusement. She pressed her hands together in a prayerful gesture and briskly walked away. Swami Atma-Triptananda put his hand on my shoulder and said, "You understand that it's traditional to touch the feet of a Swami, don't you?" "Yes, of course," came my reply, "but it makes me uncomfortable." Swami Atma-Triptananda's voice became stern. They touch your feet to receive a blessing. You cannot deny them the opportunity. But why should they seek blessings from me? I protested. He explained, because you now wear the robes of a sannyasi, a renunciate. It's actually the saffron cloth that is revered, not you. Anyone wearing this cloth will receive the same respect because of the tradition it represents. Over the centuries, countless saints and sages have worn these robes. When you wear them, you represent that tradition. And when someone touches your feet, they seek the blessings of that entire tradition. So it is not you they venerate, it is the lineage of saints and sages. After that incident, my mind churned for hours. When I stepped back to avoid having my feet touched, I thought I was being modest. But then I came to understand it was actually the most immodest thing I could have done. I had assumed her act of reverence was for me, not for the robes or the tradition. This was a sobering lesson in humility. I had much to learn about being a sannyasi. And so we end our reading there. And with that, also the chapter and the part of many chapters. Next time we may continue part 5, Finding God Everywhere, which starts with some lovely Sanskrit, which I am always so eager to read, from the Katha Upanishad. But we'll have to save our excitement, or my excitement, for later.